Hello, welcome back to my story as a Jehovah's Witness and why I left. We're going to begin chapter 5, and I'm finally glad to be finished talking about my ex-husband Harry. Talking about him has been really quite torturous. Of course, I didn't even realize that was a very condensed version because we did spend 15 years together. And just to condense everything, it was necessary to condense it because it would have just been too much to tell. So I'm glad I'm finally getting finished talking about him and discussing a very important word that Jehovah's Witnesses claim that they don't do or follow, but those of us who were Jehovah's Witnesses undoubtedly have experienced shunning. So chapter 5 will begin with right after we had lost our child. And prior to that, looking back, I didn't realize what kind of verbal and emotional abuse I had been enduring during the most part of my marriage. I didn't know any better when I got married, and I should have, but I didn't know any better. Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in divorce. It's just a scriptural thing that they don't believe in. I still really don't believe in divorce. However, there are reasons why it's best to not be married to someone anymore. And the Bible speaks of adultery as one good excuse you could use, or reason you could use, to not be married anymore in the eyes of God. That is justified if your spouse commits adultery. And also, physical abuse can be another reason why it would be considered okay and allowed for you to get a divorce from your spouse if you're a Jehovah's Witness because of physical abuse. I didn't suffer physical abuse. However, I did suffer great emotional abuse. My ex, he thought that anything that came out of my mouth, he said, was stupid. I wasn't allowed to create really much conversation, especially if it was just regular conversation about it could be anything. If I asked a question, he said, my questions were stupid. And then just a bunch of stuff like that throughout my married life to him came to the fore when I decided to separate from him. I just couldn't do it anymore. Our marriage was crumbling minute by minute by minute. We were not communicating anymore. So because I didn't feel comfortable even verbally talking to him, I started writing him little notes or letters telling him how I felt about this or that. It was ridiculous. We were pretty much roommates, living under the same roof, paying bills. He was still building the house, and we just coexisted. It was just complete emptiness between both of us. We both knew it. And he was just so focused on the house and trying to get it finished before the bank said it was time up for us to have it done. We had to have it done a certain amount of time. And it was just back and forth letter writing for a good year. that was our only communication, was letter writing. Something that really hurt Harry was the bank that was giving us these loans to build the house. They did us dirty. I don't know what the deal was, but they decided to not give us any more money to complete our home. They said that our time was up when it truly wasn't. We had documents and everything. I even went to the bank to try to fight with them to show them this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, because we just didn't have the money on our own. And we ended up losing the home. It was 85% complete. And we ended up losing the home. This was very, very traumatic for Harry, as you can imagine, because he devoted his whole time to that house, even neglecting me in the process. He gave his whole life to completing that house. That was his whole sole purpose in life, was making this house. And maybe in his mind he thought that this house could be something good for us to rekindle things once we got into the house and tried to start a family again, whatever the case was going to be. But this was very traumatic for him. I believe he went into a depression, and in the midst of us not communicating, there was one point where he said, "You know what? Let's take a 2-week trip, and let's drive from Atlanta. We'll take a 2-week trip. We'll go cross country to California and back. And we'll use this trip on the road to talk, try to work things out, and see if we can put our marriage back on track." This was this was August of 1998 or 99. I can't remember. It was, anyway. So I thought, great, I've never been out west before. It was going to be a great experience for us to be, in a sense, trapped in a car together for 2 whole weeks, so we can really try to work things out, because neither one of us really believed in divorce, especially since he held a position in the congregation as a ministerial servant. It would have been bad for him to have our marriage end for whatever reason, scripturally or non-scripturally. So we took this trip, and I call this trip the trip from hell. During that trip, for pretty much the whole time, there was no communication. He didn't want to talk. He did not want to talk. He just wanted to listen to the music. And I love to sing. I wasn't even allowed to sing in the car during this 2-week road trip. We went to oh my gosh, the Grand Canyon. Never been to the Grand Canyon before. He'd been to the Grand Canyon, but I had never been to the Grand Canyon before. When we got there, he went one way and just left me there standing, and we didn't do anything, sightseeing, anything together the whole trip. We went to the Sequoia National Forest. He went one way, and I'm just like, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to be doing this together? Enjoying these sights and talking and seeing God's beautiful creation together. And no, everywhere we went to Las Vegas. Had never been there before, and we only had a certain amount of money that we could spend for our trip. And he decided, we stayed just one night in Las Vegas, that we were going to go, gambling. I had never done anything like this before. I think it was a nickel machine that they had back then. I had won $300 on just maybe, I spent maybe 50 cents total, and I won $300. And so when we retired for the evening up in the hotel room, he decided, without even asking me, to take this money and gamble it. And I guess he was trying to win more money, but he played blackjack and he lost all of it, and then some of our other money that was specifically for our trip. Now, we didn't have hardly any money to spend in the first place. We were on a really, really strict budget. And this angered me so much because with that money that we had gotten, I really wanted to go to a show in Las Vegas with the $300 that I had won. I'm like, look, can you please take me to like the Siegfried and Roy show with the big cats, or it was some show that was going on then. He said, no, we're not doing that. But it was okay for him to take that money and use it to gamble and lose. Horrible. We then traveled to California, went to Los Angeles, went up the coast to San Francisco. Anyway, it was a beautiful, lonely, lonely, lonely trip. Came back home, and from there on out, it took a nosedive south. And my heart was broken. My heart was truly broken. I thought, this is it. This is either how it's going to be. This is over. So we tried to get some counseling from the elders in the congregation. Remember, the elders in the congregation are like the priests, the pastors, and you can go to them to confess a sin, kind of like you would do in the Catholic Church. They're supposed to keep it all quiet and give you counseling and that sort of thing to help you, get back on track scripturally, spiritually. So I went to the elders in the congregation for help, for marital help. And Harry agreed we would meet in the evenings. These meetings that we had with the elders to try to help us were very short-lived. I don't think they lasted more than 2 weeks, because these elders, who were Harry's friends, saw another side of Harry. During one of these meetings, these counseling meetings, Harry told the elders that if I didn't like how he was treating me, too bad in a sense, because he was not going to change. He refused. And one of the elders who knew him very well, was very close with him, his jaw dropped. And the elders would try to counsel him and say, that's the wrong attitude you should have as her husband, blah, blah, blah. And nope. He was not going to change. Not going to change at all. So a little bit of time passed, and I said, you know what, I can't continue to live like this. It was getting really bad with the emotional and verbal abuse. Even though I just mentioned that we weren't really communicating, I had it in letters. I had his verbal and emotional abuse kind of documented in letters, besides the oral that he personally would tell me through the years. And I did some research on how I could separate from my husband in a scriptural way that it wouldn't look bad. In other words, I wouldn't have a guilty conscience, according to Jehovah God and the Jehovah's Witness organization. And in their own publications, I had to show the elders that I was allowed to be separated from my husband, because in their own publications, quoting from other like psychological, psychiatric publications, it says that verbal and emotional abuse is just as serious as physical abuse. And it's actually harder to get over that kind of abuse more so than physical abuse, because physical scars can heal, whereas emotional ones, they may never heal, or it could take a really, really long time. And in my case, it did take a very, very long time for myself to snap out of that mental state of being abused and not having bad recall. Kind of like PTSD in a sense. That's how it felt. So after I proved to these elders that I was allowed, in a sense, to not be living with my spouse anymore, I moved back home with my parents. They were very loving and welcoming back to me, yes. And moved back home, and they were like, okay, well, she proved it to us in our own publications, so, we kind of have to let it go. I was regular pioneering at the time when all of this was happening. I had just started up again, and because I was considered a great example in the congregation as a regular pioneer, other people would, in a sense, look up to you because you've devoted 1,000 hours of your life to put in the ministry. Because I'm no longer with my husband anymore, I had to leave the regular pioneering rank. I was no longer allowed to be a regular pioneer because I was not a good example as a Christian at this time, because I was separated from my husband. Crazy. So not too long after that, in 1999, early on in 1999, Harry decided to file for divorce, and in early 2000 we were divorced. And because he divorced me, he was disfellowshipped from the congregation, but at that point he didn't even care, because he had stopped going to the Kingdom Hall for a couple of years at this point. He just stopped going because he was building the house. That was more important. He would miss going to any of the 5 meetings that we had during the week to build this house. And he had a deadline. He felt like he just needed to do that. It was no longer important to him. He admitted to me that in one of the letters that he wrote to me, that the only reason why he married me, the only reason why he became a Jehovah's Witness, in a sense, was for me. That was the only reason why. I guess he faked it. He must have truly faked all of everything. And it turned out that the con artist father that he had as a role model, an example, Harry was the same. Harry, and even his family and sisters said the same thing to me, that he was just like his dad, unfortunately. It was a true con artist. He totally played everybody, fooling everybody for the most part about who he was and what he represented, when in actuality that wasn't him at all. Not long after we divorced, and the divorce was final, he reached out to me, and I thought this was weird. And he wanted to take me to dinner to talk. I'm like, okay, fine. What's the harm in that? We still had a couple of financial ties that we had to settle in regards to our agreement and our divorce. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk to him about that. and took me to dinner, and pretty much he said that he was sorry. He wanted me back, and he just missed me and wished that he could have done better. He told me, I'm laughing now because I think it's funny. I still think it's funny. He realized the error of his ways, supposedly, by reading a book that had come out. It was very popular back then, back in the late 1990s, early 2000. It was a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He said this book opened his eyes as to how he should have treated me as his wife. And I just laughed, and I just felt like it was too little too late. There was no way. My heartstrings were tugged, of course, because while we were talking, he actually broke down and cried and grieved over the loss of our child. Finally, 2 years later, he finally, he actually cried, and he never cried. He was a very emotionless kind of person, didn't show those kind of feelings ever. And to see him cry over that loss was very touching, and also he needed to do that just for his own sanity, for his own mental wellness. He really needed to do that. But I obviously didn't take him back. So that's the end of that saga with me being married to that, excuse me, but to that asshole, because that's what he was. I even had friends, very, very good friends, that after we had separated, they told me that they had witnessed his emotional and verbal abuse while we were in the presence of our friends. They saw it and heard it firsthand. And I said, why didn't y'all come to me and say something to me? But that's kind of a touchy thing, you know. Do you put yourself in somebody else's marriage if you think something is wrong or whatever? Do you put yourself, put your nose in somebody else's business? So I understood, but to hear from so many friends that they recalled this or recalled that to me, I'm like, whoa, I remember that. But just, it was great validation for me that I wasn't just making up this in my mind at all, this abuse. So it was really, really great validation. So I want to talk about the practice of shunning. There's nothing scriptural about this whatsoever, what Jehovah's Witnesses do to those who leave the organization. Now, I left. I'm not going to discuss why I left just yet. Chapter 6 will be about that. But when I did leave, I just left. I just stopped going to the meetings. Different people in the congregation, the elders, would try to call on my phone, knock on my door, find out, where I am, why I'm not coming back, and I would just ignore every single one of those efforts. I just didn't want it anymore. Didn't want it, period. My parents were already deceased, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I kind of stuck around while they were alive, because I didn't want to break their heart to see, another one of their children not follow in their footsteps as remaining a loyal Jehovah's Witness, because like I said, my sister had left. My brother had my baby brother. He ended up leaving several years before my divorce, I want to say. Yeah. He and his wife at the time had enough too for their own reasons, and they had discussed that with me, and I understood. I really, really understood. And for each of us that leave a cult like this, you have your own personal reasons, and that's okay. But shunning, the word shunning in the dictionary means to avoid, using, accepting, engaging in, and to avoid social contact with. Pretty clear. The scriptural reasons that Jehovah's Witnesses use to shun someone are interesting. There's only one scripture. I actually did some research, and there's only one scripture that they use that validate their reason to shun someone who leaves the Jehovah's Witness organization. And that is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 13. It says, "Remove the wicked man from among yourselves." So, if a Jehovah's Witness decides that they no longer want to be a Jehovah's Witness, there's different ways that they choose to do it. You can write a letter to the Watchtower Bible Tract Society in New York City and say that you no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, to make it real official. Or you can just sneak away and not go to the meetings anymore and just kind of live in your own life and ignoring all of that. That's another way. So whatever way we ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have chosen to leave, we encounter in our day-to-day lives some friends that we used to have in the congregation, friends that we've known for years and years and years, people who I considered were my very best friends, very best girlfriends, very, very, very close friends that I had. I thought they were the best friends I could have ever had. And I never thought, ever, without knowing why I left, that they would ever shun me. And this shunning could take place anywhere. For example, where I have been working for the past 14 years is for a laboratory company. And I worked in a location where a lot of my friends would come to get blood work. Some of them, a few of them would cordially acknowledge me. Of course, they didn't have any choice. I was drawing their blood or their children's blood. So they would have to interact with me. Of course, and it was not in a scriptural way. They're not allowed to. The same with disfellowshipping. You're not allowed to discuss anything scriptural. Of course, when I left, they didn't know why I left. They didn't know what happened to me. They didn't, for all they know, I could still be going to a congregation that's no longer where they're going. So they don't really know anything about me or why I left. They just assume that I'm a bad person, or they also assume that I am an apostate, and I'm going to get into that too. So if they have to talk to you, it's very limited, kind of not loving like it used to be, like how good friends normally act around each other. It's just very cold, very standoffish. I have been to the grocery store. And I have actually crossed paths, I mean, shoulder to shoulder practically, with people that were extremely close to me. I know they saw me, I know they recognized me, and they will pretend they have blinders on and won't even acknowledge me, say hello to me, nothing. And it's because the Jehovah's Witness organization feels that if you're not going to the meetings, then you must be an apostate. Have any of you all ever heard of that word before? I'm going to give you the definition of an apostate. I'm going to give you just the generic Google definition of an apostate, okay? And that is one who has abandoned one's religious faith. So if you have abandoned your religious faith, according to like a Google definition, you are an apostate. Instead of an apostle, like Jesus Christ had apostles and disciples, you're an apostate. The JW definition, the Jehovah's Witness definition of apostate, though, is taken from a scripture in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 17. And it says, "That is why Jehovah will not rejoice over their young men, and he will have no mercy on their fatherless children and their widows, because all of them are apostates and evildoers, and every mouth is speaking senselessness." In 1991 Watchtower article, apostates are referred to as hidden rocks, and that's taken from the book of Jude, verse 12. Jude's warning helped the faithful to be aware of apostate hidden rocks that could bring about spiritual death to the other people in the congregation. Also in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 18, Jehovah's Witnesses consider all deviation from the truth to be various forms of imitation Christianity, and therefore you are labeled an apostate. They say in their another publication called the Insight on the Scriptures book that Satan caused the first human pair to apostatize, Adam and Eve. This is what Jehovah's Witnesses say in their publications, that Adam and Eve were apostates. I don't know where they get that from. When I found this, I was blown away. I'm like, really? Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were apostates. How can that be? So, religion and faith, in my opinion, don't have to go together, though. You can still have faith and not follow a man-made religion. Because I still have a spiritual connection to my Creator, but choose not to follow a man-made religion, I do not consider myself an apostate. Absolutely not. And second of all, I am definitely not going to call myself or consider myself an apostate to a cult-like religion. No way. So they can label me that if they want to. I don't care, because they have a lot of nerve saying that I'm like a evil person now. No. In my own mind and heart and belief, I can still have a spiritual connection to my Creator. and not belong to a man-made religion. So I just can't go along with that. So when you are shunned, it's because you've left the organization, and old friends are encouraged at the 5 meetings that they have a week. There are many, many times throughout the year where they remind their followers that don't talk to anybody that you know maybe not, that is not going to the Kingdom Hall anymore, because you know they could be evil, and they could maybe try to sway you into their way of thinking. They're so worried about that. You're not allowed to look at any material, spiritual, scriptural material outside of Jehovah's Witnesses publications, for one, which that speaks volumes. What are they trying to hide? What truth could maybe possibly be in another publication that they don't want you to see? So they say they don't shun, but this is definitely a lie. They do kind of put the word shunning and disfellowshipping kind of in the same sense, because when you're disfellowshipped, like I've mentioned, nobody's allowed to talk to you. There's a public announcement made from the platform during one of the meetings, you know, saying that you're disfellowshipped, so everybody knows not to talk to you. And believe me, there's a lot of gossip that goes on in churches in general, especially in Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Halls. And if you happen to have missed that announcement, don't worry. Somebody's going to let you know that such and such a person is disfellowshipped. So they pretty much have the same meaning, because when you're being shunned, like I have been shunned on numerous occasions since I've left, I've ran into some of my old best friends. They don't say a word to me. Not one person's called me, say, how am I doing? They don't know anything about me. Not a darn thing. Supposedly the elders are supposed to reach out to you, and there was one elder, good friend of mine, that did call me a few years back, but he just wanted to get my personal information, my address, and so that and some other information, so he can put me on their list in case of an emergency, you know, like World War III or something like that. They wanted to let me know what was going on. And they do this because they want you to qualify, in a sense. Like, there's a requirement in order to come back. If you ever wanted to come back, you can qualify. You have to qualify to be accepted again in their Kingdom Hall, and by the people that go there. And then I think about Jesus. Jesus's example. Jesus didn't shun anyone, did he? No. He talked to everybody. You could be the worst sinner. You could be somebody possessed by a demon. Did he shun you? No. Not at all. Not at all. So let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to say. About about disfellowshipping, I found this really fascinating. In modern time, about apostates. In modern times now, there are still certain religions that do disfellowship you. And if you were disfellowshipped because of being an apostate, or if you were given that title as an apostate, back in 2011, an Iranian pastor who converted from Islam to Christianity at the age of 19, he was convicted for apostasy and sentenced to death. There were so many examples of modern day times where if you were considered an apostate, you were sentenced to death. And on all of them, though, they were overturned. The people didn't have to die. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Did not have to die. So I'm going to end this here because I'm going to discuss how and when. I'm going to discuss, there was a time not too long after I was alone on my own, in a sense, that I was disfellowshipped. And I'm going to tell you why I was disfellowshipped and that whole horrendous story that goes along with it. It's unbelievably crazy what you're going to find out about what happened to me, and it's probably the second most horrible thing I've ever been through in my entire life. And that was the catapult that pushed me over the edge to leave this ridiculous cult organization that's called Jehovah's Witnesses. So stay tuned for that. That will be chapter 6. And I look forward to telling you about that story. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, evening, whatever it is after you've listened to this video. Please put any comments or questions you may have and down below, either on YouTube or Facebook. I love hearing your comments so far. They have touched my heart so much. The compassion that I am feeling from you, it's doing my heart really good. It really is, and it means a lot to me, and it makes me happy that I did this, because this is not easy. This has not been an easy story to have to relive, but it's an important one because I have been helped by other stories of other ex-JWs, and if this can help one person, great. I want to help. I want to help just one person if I know that. So I'll see you soon for chapter 6. Bye, guys.